Today we are going to talk about a ventricular system of the brain. You have heard the term ventricle in cardiovascular system, but this is completely different. Ventricle in general means chamber. So we are going to talk about the chamber of the brain. Okay. The ventricular system is derived from the inner lumen of the developing neural tube. As the brain continues to grow, the caverns and channels of the ventricular system adapt to the shape of cerebral hemisphere. Okay, diencephalon, pons, medulla, and cerebellum, which forms the surrounding walls. You can see here another good picture. Inferior and lateral to the corpus callosum, inferior and lateral to the corpus callosum. Remember corpus callosum, the connection between two hemispheres, are two large fluid-filled cavities that represent the beginning of the ventricular system. The most rostral cavities are the two C-shaped lateral ventricles located within the cerebral hemisphere. As the lateral ventricles extend through all of the lobes of the cerebral hemisphere, they are divided into 5 named parts. The first one, in the frontal lobe, here is the anterior horn, which transitions into the body within the frontal and parietal lobe. Projecting into the occipital lobe is the posterior horn. So up to here we named 3 parts: frontal lobe, body, and posterior or occipital lobe. A final horn extends inferiorly and anteriorly as the inferior or temporal horn. Near the splenium is the part of the corpus callosum. Near the splenium of the corpus callosum, the body, posterior, and inferior horns come together at the atrium or trigon of the lateral ventricles. Lining most of the ventricle is the choroid plexus. Do you remember choroid plexus? Choroid plexus is a kind of capillary plexus which is formed from series of modified ependymal cells responsible for producing around 500 milliliter of CSF fluid or cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, from the lateral ventricles, CSF flows through the interventricular foramen, which is called foramen of Monro. Here you can see another picture. Okay, to the stick-like third ventricle, which is surrounded by thalamus and hypothalamus. At the base we have hypothalamus, and at the lateral side walls we have thalamus. The third ventricle communicates with the fourth ventricle via the cerebral aqueduct, or the other name is aqueduct of Sylvius. Okay, which courses through the midbrain. So here we have midbrain. And the last ventricle is the fourth ventricle, which is surrounded anteriorly by pons and medulla and posteriorly by cerebellum. The fourth ventricle sends CSF out of the ventricular system and into the subarachnoid space via three foramen. The two lateral foramen is called foramen of Luschka. Remember, lateral Luschka. And the one median foramen, which is called Magendie. Look at here, Magendie median. Okay, so if you want to look more closer at the third ventricle, we have some parts on the third ventricle as well. For example, supraoptic recess, infundibular recess. Here exactly under this structure we have hypothalamus, and here we have pineal gland. So This recess is called suprapineal and pineal recess. And one important thing is that the two thalamus is connected together via interthalamic adhesion, which is passed through the third ventricle. Okay. So this is the sagittal view again of the ventricles, lateral ventricle, third ventricle, fourth ventricle. The 3D view. This is axial view or cross-sectional view. You can see here the lateral ventricles, frontal horn, body, occipital horn. Here you can find choroid plexus or choroid plexus capillaries. And at the center, you can see third ventricle. And here we have thalamus, which is which are at the lateral side of the third ventricle. And this is another view. You can see the coronal view, 3D coronal view of the ventricles. Again, 2C-shaped lateral ventricle, slit-like third ventricle, and fourth ventricle, which is located on the brain stem. And also you can see Sylvius aqueduct, which is passed through the midbrain. This is another coronal view, 2D coronal view of the brain ventricle. You can see here lateral ventricle, third ventricle, inferior horns, okay, and also fourth ventricle. And here you can see axial image of MRI, real MRI. You can see these two are lateral ventricles, again, frontal horn, body, posterior horns. Here is the lower cut. You can see third ventricle, foramen of Monro, the connection between the connection between lateral ventricle and third ventricle. Again, posterior horns. Okay. And also you can see choroid plexus inside lateral ventricles. And this is a sagittal view of the ventricular system. You can see lateral ventricles, also third ventricles, and fourth ventricles. Okay, thank you.